In today's world, you will probably discover that many of your clients will want to have one or maybe a variety of different language translations of your project. And they may at first, without really understanding the background of this, may think that the only way to really do this is to take it out to a special service. But you need to reassure your clients that you are actually in the best position to do a language translation of the project, because what happens with most language translations is that it will not be the same length. Some languages just take longer to say the same thing. So if you are the one that does the translation, well, then you can manipulate the music to last longer. You can add extra shots from your shoot to fill and cover the extra material. And in the same way, some languages just don't take as many words to say the same thing. Okay, so in order for your client to get the best results, they really need to understand that you are the best person to do this. And if you've never done a language translation before, we're going to walk you right through it. Edius version 6 has actually come out with some new tools that facilitate the process, make it a little easier. And once you know how, a language translation is actually quite simple. Now, the first thing that you'll probably want to do is get your script translated. Your script, all your voiceovers, any written text needs to be translated. Any graphics that you have with your video, title bars, introduction, titles, whatever is in the original language of the project needs to be translated to the new language so that you can work with it. And sometimes your client will have someone on site that has that capability. Other times it's better to actually go out to a professional service to get that translated. And there's a website that I have used for probably the last 15 years or so, ever since I think it became available online, and that is Clark Translations. And the reason I continued to stay with them is that right from the very start, I got such great compliments from the voiceover talent, narrative talent that I hired to read the scripts about what a great translation job that I had gotten done. And when you get independent, voluntary praise like that about your translations, they must be doing something right. And it's good for the person who's doing the translation to know that this is being translated for video, and that the person who's editing may not necessarily know the new language, because what can happen with some translators is that they'll take a paragraph and totally rearrange and restructure the order of thoughts. And while that may be fine for a book or a magazine article, for a video, especially if you don't know the language you're translating to, it can really mess you up. The B-roll shots just won't match up with what's being said. So it's important to use a translating service that understands that this will be for video, and that the sentence structure needs to stay the same, and that even within each sentence, if I give a list of programs, for example, especially with this client that I do a lot of work for, they have programs of healthcare, agricultural training, small loans programs, skills training, adult education. Well, if I list that in a whole sentence in English, I want to be sure that the translation is listing them in the same order. So just a word to the wise as you send out your scripts to be translated, just give them a note of explanation that this will be used in a video translation, and that you want the sentence structures to remain intact. Okay, well, let's go ahead with our language translation. And this may seem a little bit out of sequence in our tutorials, at least for a few weeks until I get some more tutorials recorded. Normally, this would be one of the last things you do. And where we left off in our tutorials right now, we're still kind of working on this project with Vonnie. But in real life, in real time, I'm finished the project, and I'm at a point where I need to get the translation done for my client to meet a deadline. And so I thought I might as well go ahead and record the tutorial while I'm actually doing the translation. Now, of course, the next thing after you get your script back from Clark Translations or whoever does your translation for you, the next thing that you'll need to do is hire voice talent. And in this particular case, in this project that I'm working on, the client actually has provided the voices. And that's kind of because they're trying to save some money. They're a nonprofit organization with very low budgets, and they just prefer to try and cut corners and save money wherever they can. And so they've provided me with their own voices. And it maybe probably did save them maybe $1,000, $1,500, because voice talents today don't really like to pick up a script, even if it only has a couple of sentences in it, without charging $100, $150, and goes up from there. If your script is quite long, you can end up spending, sometimes I spend $1,000 for one voiceover talent as they record narration for 2 or 3 videos for me. So yes, they did save a little bit of money, but I have to say that the quality is never going to be as good as if you hire professional talent. These people record their voice every day as their life business, and so they know what they're doing. They know how to enunciate. They know how to get the expression just right. They've got nice sounding voices, and everything is smooth. And then they also they either know themselves or they have someone else who's professional at getting the audio recorded and edited for you. And so wherever possible, try and encourage your clients to come up with the budget for professional voiceover talent. And if you're not familiar with this website, I really recommend this as being the top place on the internet to hire voice talent. It's voice123.com. And this is an amazing service. You can submit the first paragraph of your script, and within, a couple of hours, you will have 20, maybe 30 different people doing an audition for you, actually reading your script. And so you can get a great idea of how it's going to sound, and you can choose the best, or you can even actually send a link to your client and let them choose the voices that they like. And so I really recommend voice123.com, and they have most of the major languages covered there, and you can get professional talent for almost any language. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started on this translation of this program. What we have here is the Vani video completed, and now what we need to do is actually translate it into Norwegian. The client that commissioned this video is actually from Norway, and yet because I don't speak Norwegian very well, more than a couple of words, I go ahead and I write the script and produce an English version of the project first, and then translate it into Norwegian, or norsk, as the case may be, for them, and work with them. I send them proofs over the internet, and they are able to kind of help me along with any rough spots, and then get them the version in their own language. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do the translation. Now, what I usually like to do is just start a new sequence with the material. Unfortunately, Edius does not allow you, there doesn't seem to be the option of copy sequence. You can copy a whole project, and so we could do a save as, and save this as Vani Norwegian. But we would end up getting all of these other sequences in that new project as well. We've actually got a number of sequences going here. We have a whole other project on Cambodia that we're working on that's using footage from the same shoot. And we have that also in Norwegian, and we have different versions of this same project at different lengths for different purposes. And so you can see we've got a whole list of sequences here. We don't necessarily want to start a whole new project or copy a project and have all of these sequences just for a language translation. So we'll go ahead and use our same project and just make a new sequence. But because Edius doesn't really seem to allow for make a copy of a sequence, at least I haven't been able to find it in the documentation. If somebody knows how to do that, send me an email, please. Thank you. So what we need to do is copy all of the material in our sequence and paste it into a new sequence. And that's fairly easy to do. Let's just go ahead and collapse our tracks so that we can see all of the project at once. We don't want to have any music track down there that we're not grabbing. And we don't have any more video tracks. So right now we're taking a look at the whole sequence and all of the clips and audio and media that's involved and associated with that project. Now what we want to do is select all of the media in one swoop. And you might think that just Control A would do that for you, but Control A really only selects media on the track that you have selected. So if we pointed our selection to, say, track 2, then when we hit Control A, it'll select all of the media on that track. And likewise, if we pointed down to video track 1 and hit Control A, it is going to select all of the video that is on track A, plus all of the audio that is associated with those clips, and leave everything else unselected. And so what we really need to do is use our lasso trick, and how we do that again is just point your mouse to the upper left-hand corner and start dragging down and to the right. And then as that lasso surrounds all of your media, you're going to select all of your clips. And once you have it selected, you can just do a Control C and start your new sequence. And the way we can start a new sequence is just this little symbol up here, create new sequence, hit that once, and you have a new sequence. And let's go and find our 10-minute mark, collapse our timeline a little bit. Okay, and once we're approximately at our 10-minute point, we can go ahead and send this material with a Control V. Now it's good to go over here and select the video 1 track, so it's being highlighted there, so that Edius knows where to send the primary track again, and everything else should fall into place. So Control V, and we have our program in a brand new sequence. Now, just to keep things organized and straight, I'll maybe go ahead and rename my tracks again, especially my audio tracks. In this case, it's a very simple project, and there isn't a lot of video associated. You really only have 2 video tracks, and there's only 4 graphics on that track, so we won't worry too much about the video. But let's rename our audio. The first one was ambient, and the second one is interviews, I believe. And the third one was voiceovers. In this case, it is the English voiceover. So let's rename it that. And the last one is music. And then what we need to do here is add a new track for our new language. And what we could do is just actually add one down here. But I like to keep it close to the original language. And so let's insert it up here, and then as we add a track, it will now fall into place right underneath the English. And so now we have a blank track to receive our new language. Probably the next step that I'd recommend you doing, there's actually a variety of different ways that you could approach doing something like this. Some work better than others, some actually take longer than others. And so I'm going to try and show you the most efficient way, the way that I have found works the best after doing, I don't know if I can say hundreds of these translations over the years, but I have done a lot for these clients that want to have their program in different languages. So what I would recommend that you do is divide up your program at the natural breaks. And in the case of this short documentary video, my natural breaks are probably in most cases showing up right at the breaks of the music itself. And even though we've got what looks like 3 pieces of music down here, I'm guessing that this is actually the same piece of music. It just wasn't long enough to cover the part of the video that I wanted to cover with that type of music. And so I just extended out the music several times. Let's just take a closer look at this. We see that indeed it is all the same piece of music, GMP AV 322-11. And so that would be one natural break. Let's go ahead and lasso the media that is associated with that first piece of music, and then point to any clip. I like to find one that is large enough that I won't be running into any problems and inadvertently trimming a clip because I've pointed too close to the edge. So find a clip that's large, just press down on it, and with your mouse, your left mouse button held down, just drag that across so that you've separated that portion of your video from the other. And We've got quite a break there. Looks like that probably because we have our insert and ripple mode on. Let's just, for now, change this back to overwrite mode. We'll actually, as we do this procedure of making language translations, we're going to be switching back and forth between the overwrite and the insert mode depending on what our needs are. Okay, so let's find our next natural break with this piece of music. Grab another portion there. So we've got a good amount of space in between the portions, and looks like we've just got a little bit of different music here at the end. Let's maybe just grab the end piece here and drag it, separate it out from that piece. Now we have, for this little 8-minute short documentary, we have 4 separate sections of the video. And now as we bring in the new language, if it's running a little bit longer, it will be easier to work with now that we have some space in between the 2 segments. And if we find that we don't have quite enough space, again, it's quite easy just to grab the whole thing and move it over more. Okay, now before we go grab our Norwegian narration and voiceover, I think in this actual video there is no narration, it's all just voiceover. I noticed that we don't have a track anymore. We must have hit the undo too many times a few minutes ago. Let's go ahead and add that again. Add audio track. Just need one. And let's rename this Norsk. For those of you who know Norwegian, sorry if that's spelt wrong. Kind of the way it sounds. Now it looks like I have had this set for normal editing where I have 2 monitors to work with and just have the timeline window and my preview windows up on this side, and all of my bins are nicely over on my second monitor, which makes it very nice for editing. If you don't have that setup, you want to try and get that, you'll find that editing is a lot easier. But for the purposes of these tutorials, because it's difficult to record 2 screens at once and do a tutorial that way, we have been working with just 1 screen. And that way also, if people are only working with 1 screen, they get an idea of what's possible with just 1 screen. Now I have it saved as preset here. And so now we're back to what you have probably become familiar with, kind of my layout where all of my bins are together in this part of the screen, and my timeline down here, my preview windows up here. Okay, so now we are good to go. We can go up to our bin and look for our narration, and we've placed the Norwegian narration in a separate folder just to keep it separate from the English. So the first piece is actually Vani comes on and talks about her life a little bit. And so we need to find where our client has provided the Norwegian voice for Vani. And as I look, this is the first time I've kind of really taken a close look at this. I dropped them in without really looking at it. Looks like the client has very nicely divided up Vani's voices into the paragraphs. You know, and that's something I should probably mention. It really helps if you can print out the English script or your own native language script, the original project language, paragraph by paragraph, and then have the new language that you're translating to in right underneath your original language, so that you can kind of follow along. And even though you may not understand the new language very well, there, especially if it's European languages, there will be very many similarities, and you can notice those similarities in the words a lot better when you can see it on text. And so those will give you clues as to how you are lining things up visually with the new language. And so I highly recommend that you take the translation and insert it paragraph by paragraph just underneath your original language. And how nice of my client to provide this paragraph by paragraph. So we'll just bring in the first paragraph here of Vani's voiceover.
Hei, jeg heter Vanni. Jeg bor I en liten landsby omtrent midt I landet.
So what we can do then is just drag that and put it in right under the English. Now, let's maybe open up our tracks here a little bit. And we see that the English starts there. Let's go ahead and try this. So we're starting the Norwegian voice of Vani right at the same point that the English starts. And And it looks like it might be running just a little bit long. What we can do is take a look at our script and see how that paragraph ends in English. We can mute the Norwegian track for a moment and hear where this is ending in English.
On a small farm that we share with my grandfather.
And as we look at the script, we do see that that is, in fact, the end of the first paragraph. And as we look at our Norwegian track here that's muted, we see that it does run longer. And so here's where we're going to have to expand out our video, add a little bit more, maybe add a new shot, or at least extend out some of the shots that are there so that we see them longer. So let's go ahead and mute the English track and turn on our Norwegian track and just kind of get a feel for where we might want to add a new shot or extend out our clips.
Hei, jeg heter Vanni. Jeg bor I en liten...
Well, we see that we could probably bring in the Norwegian voice to start a little sooner and still be fine. We'll be able to still be able to hear Vanni introduce herself. Let's maybe turn on our track so that we can manipulate her audio a little better and just start bringing her down sooner by dragging over our node there, and where we have dropped her down, we can drag that over so that she is, her volume is down before the Norwegian girl speaks.
Hei, jeg heter Vanni. Jeg bor I en liten landsby omtrent midt I landet Kambodsja I Sørøst-Asia. Jeg har 2 brødre.
Okay, we see that she's, even though we don't know Norwegian very well, we can kind of, especially as we look at the script, see that she's talking about the 2 brothers. She starts to talk about them right here, and yet we've already started to see them. And so what we could probably do is extend out the visual of Vanni speaking, and then that will push everything down, and the brothers clip will fall into place, and then everything else down the line will probably look okay as well. Let's check that out, see if that works. And how we can do that is go ahead and change our mode settings to be in the insert mode and the ripple mode on. This symbol here shows that the ripple mode is on. If it's off, you have this orange line through it. Let's turn that on. And yet we don't want to ripple the voice. Now, it probably wouldn't change anything because it's all one clip, but just as a matter of principle, let's shut off the ripple mode for the English voiceover and the norsk voiceover. And now when we push our video down, it won't affect those tracks. So now what we can do is just go ahead and point to this little division in the transition here. And once you see the orange closed brackets symbol show up, you can press down on your mouse, your left mouse button, and now start pushing everything down the line. And you'll see that, that everything moves together down the line. The video, the ambient audio, and the interview track is moving all together down the line. And we can bring it down just to that point where the brothers, where the shot of the 2 brothers show up at the appropriate point where she begins to talk about them. Now let's take a look at that and see if that worked.
Kambodsja I Sørøst-Asia. Jeg har 2 brødre og en lillesøster.
Okay, and as we listen to it, we can see that the mention of the sisters comes on a little quicker than it did in English. So let's just now shut off our insert mode and go back to the overwrite mode, and then just slide that back just a hair so that as she begins to talk about her sisters, we start to see that shot dissolve on.
Og en lillesøster. Vi bor her på gården sammen med foreldrene våre og bestefar.
Okay, so now everything kind of falls into place a lot better, and we hear talking about how we all live together here on this farm that we share with our grandfather as we see our wide establishing shot of the farmyard. Okay, so now we're ready for the next paragraph, Vanni number 2. And we wouldn't have to bring this into the play window. We could just drag this down and point it to the track where we want it to go. All right, so let's play this out. And what I like to do is just kind of follow along in the script. Even though I don't know Norwegian very well, I can pick out a few words here and there. I did a little study of it when I took on this client. I've got some programs from the internet and tried to learn some of the basics. And so I know some of the words and can kind of get an indication for where we are at, if there's any visual problems, if some of the B-roll's not lining up properly. I can tell as I follow along in the script as I listen to the voiceover.
Jeg liker selvfølgelig veldig godt å bo her I Kambodsja. I dette landet har vi 2 årstider. Vi har regntiden. Da regner det masse, nesten hver eneste dag. Dette årstiden.
Okay, I can see already that we're running a little long again. Our music kind of came up there because in the English version we have a space there, and I kind of like to bring the music up just a little bit when we have a breather moment there. And so let's just drag this music down. In fact, it's almost a given that you're going to have to lay your music down again, and so you could actually work with the music track off so that it's not distracting you. But I can see I wouldn't have been able to pick it up just listening to her voice, but as I read it, I can see that she's actually talking about how we can have a heavy rain every day in the wrong place. It's actually down here more. And so in order for the video to be in the right place, it needs to show up here where she talks about how we can have a heavy rain almost every day, as I have this clip up here with the dark clouds. However, we don't want to just push it down there because we're in the overwrite mode. It overwrites the clip that is there, and we may be able to use that because in leading up to that statement, she's just talking generically about how we have 2 seasons. One is the rainy season. So we could have the shot that's there maybe come before it. And maybe just let's just maybe try something here. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Switch to the insert mode and drag that clip over and place it. Yeah, it kind of reversed the shots there. It did leave a little gap there, but we can work with that. So now as we play it out, she's talking about the rain.
Har vi 2 årstider. Vi har regntiden. Da regner det masse, nesten hver eneste dag.
Almost every day. Having a heavy rain almost every day is now in the right place. And then she goes on to talk about how this is when we grow our rice and vegetables. So this shot works very well there.
Dette årstiden for dyrking av ris og grønnsaker. Og så har vi den tørre tiden.
And then we have the dry season. So that's going to work out well. We might want to just extend this out a little bit to kind of cover the gap there. And that way our dissolve happens kind of in between her sentences there. Okay, and more dry season shots are right here. Let's just drag those over.
Tørt og støvete. Vi har aldri vinter eller snø, sånn som dere I Norge, bare regntid og tørketid.
Okay, well, that works out perfectly now. And we can go after our next paragraph.
Som du kanskje gjetter når du ser den tørre jorda og de inntørkete rismark.
All right, as I follow along on the script here, I see that once again, we're running a little long. She doesn't start talking about how much she loves the rainy season when all of these fields are a beautiful green until much further down the line. And so it doesn't really go with her hand motions here where she talks about how all these fields are such a beautiful green in the rainy season. It just doesn't time up. And so what we need to do is figure out how we can bring her stand up there over a little bit in order to line up with the words. So let's go up, maybe just to give ourselves a little bit more room here to look at our tracks. Let's drag this up. We're already pretty happy with the visuals the way they are, so it's not as critical when we're doing language translations, and we can open up our timeline like this. Okay, so here is the shot here that we want to try and expand out. We see that she starts talking about the green fields in the script. Right here. And so we want to line it up so that her hands are starting to show and talk about the green fields as the voiceover talks about it. Okay, and now what we can do is extend this back and see if it still works, if she's still talking as we lead into the shot.
Som du kanskje gjetter når du ser
And thankfully she is.
når alle disse jordene vakre og grønne, men tørketiden også.
So as she now starts to talk about how the fields are a lovely green during the rainy season, we want to see one of those shots again of the nice green fields. And we can just bring that over from the English edit and dissolve into
Den
it.
også morsom I tørketiden fra
And then it comes back to her talking about how even though she loves the rainy season, the dry season is a lot of fun as well. And so we can come back to her standing in the field.
har vi en spesiell type palme.
And she, in English, points to the palm trees near her house and how her family has a business where her father climbs these palm trees and collects a syrup that drips down from them to make sugar. And so we're still running a little bit long, but everything's kind of lining up nicely. What we can probably do is just extend this shot of the palm trees out a little bit to finish off our paragraph.
Palme.
Now we'll add some dissolve there. And dissolve out of the green rice
Til
fields.
meg tjener familien. I Kambodsja har vi en
And a shot like that we'll just leave as a cut. It's just if we had two cameras out in the field there and we were just cutting to the close-up. All right, so that's the end of that paragraph. We can now go after paragraph 4. Okay, so let's see what we have here.
Faren min henter palmesaft fra trærne 2 ganger om dagen.
Okay, she's starting to talk about her father and how he gets up early in the morning to make his rounds to collect the sugar. So let's just drag that whole section in and see, once again, it is running a little bit long. So what we're going to have to do is go back to our bins and find more shots of her father collecting the palm juice. Maybe just so we can see what we're doing visually a little better, let's open up our first video track there so that we can get our first and last thumbnails showing up better on our track. And that way, as we read our script and follow along with her, we can get a better idea of how the shots are lining up with what she says.
Faren min henter palmesaft fra trærne 2 ganger om dagen. Han står opp tidlig om morgenen I 5-tiden og tar første runden.
All right, so as we follow along in our script here, we see that, again, it is running a lot longer than it did in English, and that as she's talking about how her father climbs up the trees, we see that that shot is out of place and needs to be further down the timeline. So maybe what we'll do, in order to get this shot of him climbing further down the timeline where it needs to be, let's insert another shot of him to lead into this sequence of him climbing the tree. And we found one here in our bin, and that should work. Let's go to our insert mode and now bring this into our timeline and just pop it down there. Everything pushes down. Okay, we see that it's still coming on just a little soon. We want the shot of him climbing to start here. And so what we can do, because we're on the insert mode, we can stretch out this first shot of him climbing the tree a little bit longer so that the next shot of him climbing the tree lines up nicely where she begins to talk about him climbing the trees. Okay, so now we've added our extra material, we've pushed everything down, and hopefully the rest of that paragraph lines up nicely.
Når han har klatret opp I toppen av treet, lager han små kutt I blomsten og setter flasken rett under. Og ut fra de små kuttene I palmen.
You can see that she's talking about him placing the flask just a little bit before we see it. And so maybe what we need to do is start that clip sooner. And because we're in the insert mode, what we can do is simply go to the clip itself, maybe expand out a little bit. And once we've just got the one line lit up here, the yellow on the right-hand side, we can point to that point with our mouse. And by pressing down on our left mouse button, we can then start dragging to the right, and we can see that we're actually shortening that clip. We want to see just a little bit of him putting his knife back, so let's try that.
Og kutt I blomsten, og setter flasken rett under. Og ut fra de små kuttene I palmeblomsten.
Let's just maybe see if we can go into the previous clip a little bit.
Lagra små kutt I blomsten.
We might be able to do that. Let's just get that point where we can see both the yellow and the green showing up. And now we can slide that one clip back just a little bit more so we can see a little bit of... And now by selecting that one again, we can go into it just a little bit more. You'll notice that all the clips down the timeline drag along with us.
Til blomsten, og setter flasken rett under.
There, that works a lot better. We can hear her talking about how he sets his flask right at the right time, where he grabs that container and puts it into place. Okay, well, you get the idea how you can manipulate your shots a little bit. Looks like we're just running again a little short at the end. I think that actually the way that we produced this, yes, there was another shot that should have been with this section, or at least with a part of this section. And so we can drag that over and finish up our section just about right.
Og ned I alle trærne på ruta si, henger han alle beholderne på stokken og bærer de hjem.
Yeah, that works. That timing works out well. And now we're ready for our next section. All right, and then what we can do is bring the two sections together now. And this is kind of a little unusual situation where we have one section kind of rolling into the next. But let's collapse this down, and what we can do is set our in point here where the voiceover in Norwegian ends. Maybe just give it a couple of seconds there, and then set an in point there. And even though we're going to lose this portion temporarily, we can easily slide it back. Let's now take it to the very beginning point of where the English narration starts and set an out point there. And now we have this whole section selected that we're going to delete. So now with this section selected, let's use the keyboard shortcut Alt and then the D key, Alt D. And that collapses the timeline nicely and gets rid of that whole section on all tracks. And now we can stretch our, we're in the insert mode. We want to change back to the overwrite mode. Now we can stretch out that one shot of her father bringing in the sugar and placing it on the rack. And so now we hear the Norwegian voice ending and the English starting.
Henger han alle beholderne på stokken og bærer de hjem.
Vanny is a big help in our sugar business because her school shares classrooms.
Okay, so now at this point, what we're doing is we're kind of hearing the father talk about how Vanny is such a big help while we're still seeing him place his sugar. And then we dissolve up into him speaking.
Class in the afternoons.
So what we really need to do now is go after the Norwegian voiceover for her father. Let's go back to narration from Norway and look for Vanny's dad. And here it is here. And again, they've divided up into paragraphs, which helps a lot. Well, let's maybe just drag that down to the timeline. And we can start it at the same place where the English started. And let's shut off, let's mute the English and just listen to the Norwegian.
Vanny flink til å hjelpe til med sukkerpalmene, ettersom hun deler klasserom med de yngre elevene.
Now, once again, we don't have to worry about the fact that the music is not there. We'll have to, before we're all finished the project, lay the music back in nicely. So let's just carry on without the music.
Går hun på skolen om ettermiddagene? Det betyr at hun har mye fri om formidagene.
Now, as we take a look at this visually, we see that At first glance, it's running a little short than what the English is, and that the English father goes right out to this point before we start seeing Vonnie on camera again. But then as we take a look at it a little closer, we see that we've broken the English up. So what we need to do now is just kind of go through it and make sure that the visuals line up with what the father is saying.
Vanni flink til å hjelpe til med sukkerpalmene. Ettersom hun deler klasserom med de yngre elevene, går hun på skolen om ettermiddagene. Det betyr at hun har mye fri om formidagene og kan hjelpe til med det som skal gjøres hjemme.
Okay, and as we play it out and follow along sentence by sentence, we see that it's lining up pretty good, working well with what happened in English, except that this shot here of her carrying the palm juice over to the big container needs to start a little bit later. So we could go back and just see if it's possible to click right in the middle there so that both the green and the yellow show up, and slide that across and see if that works.
Eller kvister som har falt oppi I løpet av natten.
Well, they're kind of already finished the activity that they're talking about there, so see if we can pick it up a little bit sooner. We could do our F6 and go into our slip trim mode, and then with our clip selected, then just scroll it across, and as we watch our preview monitors, we can see that it's okay to start it somewhere about there. The script is talking about how when I get back from the father saying, when I get back from the field, Vonnie strains the palm juice. And so that's a good start there.
Når jeg kommer hjem om morgenen, hjelper hun med å tømme beholderne med palmesaft gjennom en sil for å fjerne blader eller kvister som har falt oppi I løpet av natten. Vi tømmer deretter palmesaft. And
yet it cuts nicely to her taking the pail over to the big container. Well, I don't think that we need to go through the whole video. We don't need to take all of your time on that. You get the idea of what you need to do in order to extend clips out. And in some cases, you'll need to cut clips out. Sometimes the language will be much shorter in the new language than it was in your original language, and you don't want a lot of dead space. Let's see, just see if there's any sample of that. Let's see how the length on the interview with Vonnie's mom works out. See if we need to cut anything out of her. Let's go after Vonnie's mom, part 1, and drag it down into place.
Vonnie ei vakker og omsorgsfull jente. Selv om hun bare 12 år gammel, hun allerede en god hjelp for oss her hjemme.
You see that her graphic somehow didn't come along with the rest of it. Let's put it back into place. Oh, that's her dad. Well, that is really out of place. We must not have had that track selected when we were making and brings Vonnie's mom. Actually, what we'll need to do, in fact, is take away the English and bring in the... See, right now it says Vonnie's mom, which won't work for this. Let's delete that, for that matter, and go up and look under graphics and go after Vonnie's mom and drag it down to the timeline. And now we see that that's in Norwegian. Just grab the end of that, slide it back, and we'll need to do a dissolve out. Turn our mix on. Add a node, and now we can dissolve.
Hun lager mat, vasker klær, hjelper.
Okay, and now we can see how we're doing on... As we look at it visually, it looks like it is running much shorter. Let's take a look at the printed text and see. What we can do is turn on our English and see if this section is actually finishing the paragraph.
The cows need to either be tied up or carefully watched.
Okay, and as we look at our script, that is the end of that paragraph. Now we can go listen to the Norwegian, and as we read along, we can see, is that actually finishing that paragraph?
Ettersom vi ikke har gjerder for kuene her I Kambodsja, må kuene enten bindes eller passes på.
Yes, and so we see that it is running a little bit short, or quite a bit short, and so we are going to have to maybe cut some of these visuals out, or at least make them a lot shorter. And
Vanni er ei vakker.
Now we see that in the English, just like we did with her father, we hear her mother talking before we see her. What we might be able to do, get away with, is just to slide this over in the Norwegian version so that we don't start hearing the mother talk until we actually see her. So Vani's doing the laundry.
Vanni er ei
Now, if we're going to let her mother speak just a little bit before we hear the voiceover, we really should go in and bring up the volume on her speaking. And we see that we have it here, and we do have it stretched out to where she started before. Let's go ahead and slide this back. Now, to avoid affecting the video portion of this clip, let's press down on our Alt key, and now as we make an adjustment to the audio, it's not going to affect the video portion. Let's maybe bring it out so that it starts at the beginning of the dissolve up. And then let's just bring her audio up so that we hear her speaking just a little bit. And because we're dissolving up, let's just slide that down. But we want to bring her audio up so that we hear her speaking just a little bit prior to the Norwegian voiceover coming on.
Vanni er ei vakker, omsorgsfull jente. Selv om hun bare er 12 år gammel, er hun allerede en god hjelp for oss her hjemme. Hun lager mat, vasker klær, hjelper oss med sukkeret, og i helgen når hun ikke er på skolen, hjelper.
Okay, we see that it now lines up a lot better. She's talking about how Vani's a big help. She cooks the meals. She helps with processing the sugar. But about here, she's already starting to talk about how on her day off from school on Sunday, she helps with the family cows. And so we need to bring this shot over. And what we could do is maybe being in the overwrite mode, we could just go ahead and grab that clip and slide it over.
Hjelper hun til med å passe kuene.
And it's still a little unstable there at the beginning of that. Let's trim that back and then push it over again.
Hjelper hun til med å passe kuene. Ettersom vi ikke har gjerder for kuene her i kamp.
And now we see that we're already becoming towards the end of what she has to say here, and yet we've got this big long clip of Vani walking through the fields with her cows that we kind of want to keep in the video. So what we can do is maybe take it a little bit later in the shot. And maybe what we want to do at this point is just slide the narration back temporarily and delete the gap with an in and an out. And the Alt D key will bring our video together. And now we can just slide our narration back, and that works a lot better.
Må kuene enten bindes eller passes på.
And so that should give you a good idea of how you can perform a translation of your video, and how it helps to be able to go back and forth between the insert mode and the overwrite mode as you perform various tasks of stretching video out or shortening video out, replacing video, and how it's helpful to keep in mind that with version 6, you can choose which tracks are going to be affected by your ripple edit, and that can all work together to be very helpful in performing a video translation. See if there was anything else that we wanted to point out as it relates to video. Of course, when you're all done, you're going to have to go back and turn on your music track and stretch that music out again so that it works. Move it over. And you'll have to listen to it all carefully and make sure it comes together okay, and at an appropriate place in the music, add a dissolve, and that way you can end your music in an appropriate way, and so forth. Well, I'll go ahead and do the rest of the video on my own, but I think that you now have a good idea of how you can easily do a language translation and save your client a lot of grief trying to find another agency. And in the end, you'll be able to do a lot better job than another agency because you have all of the media to work with. You can stretch the clips out, add new clips as you need to, and work with the music track and get it back into place a lot better than anybody else could because it's your project. All right, that's it for language translations.